A heroic emergency landing turned into a federal case. But not against the pilot, against the HOA president who crossed the wrong line. The emergency lights painted the darkening sky in alternating red and blue as first responders surrounded the small Cessna that had just made an emergency landing in my field. The pilot was conscious, thank God, sitting on the tailgate of the ambulance while paramedics checked his vitals. I was standing nearby coordinating with the fire chief and making sure everyone had access to whatever they needed for my property. Everything was under control. The FAA had been notified and the pilot would make a full recovery. That's when 3 squad cars came screaming down my private road, sirens wailing like the world was ending. The lead officer jumped out, hand on his holster, looking around wildly. He spotted me and marched over with purpose. "Sir, we received a 911 call reporting that you caused an aircraft to crash on this property. I need you to step back while we investigate." Couldn't help but sigh. There was only one person in a 50-mile radius who would make such a ridiculous claim. "Let me guess," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my frustration. "Was the caller's name Karen?" "My name is Eli, and I'm a retired Air Force mechanic who spent 25 years keeping fighter jets in the air. When I left the service, I bought this ranch specifically because it came with a small, perfectly legal airstrip that the previous owner had registered with the FAA back in the 1980s. I maintain it for hobbyist flyers, the occasional crop duster, and yes, emergency landings. Everything is done by the book with proper permits, insurance, and regular inspections." The storm had rolled in fast that afternoon, catching everyone off guard. I was in my workshop when I heard the distinctive sputter of an engine losing power. Years of experience kicked in immediately. I ran outside to see a small single-engine plane descending rapidly, the pilot clearly fighting to maintain control. My emergency training took over as I grabbed the radio and started broadcasting on the emergency frequency while sprinting toward the landing strip. The pilot, a man named Marcus, managed to put the plane down in my east field just short of the actual runway. It wasn't pretty, but he walked away with only minor injuries. Within minutes I had him out of the aircraft and was on the phone with emergency services, giving them exact coordinates and status updates. The system worked exactly as it was supposed to, a textbook emergency response that probably saved Marcus's life. What I didn't know was that Karen Thompson, the president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, had been watching the entire event unfold from her McMansion on the hill overlooking my property. Now most rational people, seeing a plane make an emergency landing, would either offer help or mind their own business. But Karen wasn't most people. She was the type who measured grass height with a ruler and sent violation notices for mailboxes that were 2 shades off the approved color palette. From her living room window, Karen didn't see a successful emergency landing and rescue operation. She saw what she wanted to see: an illegal aircraft operation happening right next to her pristine gated community. Without bothering to investigate or even step outside for a better look, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "There's been a plane crash and I believe the property owner caused it," she announced to the dispatcher with the authority of someone who had watched too many crime dramas. "He's running some kind of illegal airfield over there. I've been documenting his activities for months. This crash is probably insurance fraud or drug smuggling or something. You need to send officers immediately before he covers it up." The dispatcher, professionally trained to take all calls seriously, sent units to investigate what sounded like a potential crime scene. This is how I found myself explaining to 3 bewildered police officers that no, I hadn't caused the crash, and yes, everything here was completely legal and already under control. "Officers," I said calmly, pulling out my phone to show them the relevant documents I kept digitized for exactly this kind of situation. Here's my FAA registration for the airstrip. Here's my permit from the county. Here's the radio log showing the pilot's emergency call. And if you contact the FAA emergency response team, they'll confirm I followed proper protocol to the letter." The lead officer reviewed everything while his partners interviewed the first responders. It didn't take long for them to realize they'd been sent on a wild goose chase. Just as they were wrapping up, Karen's white Range Rover came barreling down my driveway, despite the private property and authorized vehicles only signs she passed. She jumped out wearing her trademark pearls and pantsuit, her face twisted in righteous indignation. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she announced breathlessly. "I'm the one who called. As president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, I have a responsibility to protect our community from dangerous operations like this." "Ma'am," the officer said slowly, "this appears to be a legitimate emergency landing on a registered airstrip. The property owner followed all proper procedures." Karen's face went red. "That's impossible. There's no way this is legal. Do you have any idea how this affects our property values? The noise, the danger, the type of people this attracts." "What type of people would that be?" I asked innocently. "Licensed pilots making emergency landings during storms?" She whirled on me, finger pointing like a weapon. "You know exactly what you're doing, Eli. Running this airport next to our family neighborhood. There are children who could have been killed. The nearest house in your development is over a mile away," I pointed out. "And again, this is a registered emergency airstrip, not an airport. Big difference." "I don't care what you call it," Karen spat. "It's dangerous and probably illegal. Officers, I demand you shut this down immediately." The lead officer looked tired. "Ma'am, this is under federal jurisdiction. The FAA handles aviation matters, not local law enforcement. If you have concerns, you need to contact them." Karen's eyes lit up like she'd just been given the nuclear codes. "The FAA. Perfect. I'll make sure they know exactly what's going on here. This won't stand. I have connections." As she stormed back to her car, I called out, "Karen, I'd be careful about making false reports to federal agencies. They take that pretty seriously." She paused at her car door and turned back with a sneer. "We'll see who's making false claims when I'm done with you." The officers left soon after, shaking their heads at the waste of resources. I helped load Marcus into the ambulance and promised to secure his aircraft until the FAA investigators arrived. Everything seemed to be wrapping up normally. I should have known better. Karen Thompson didn't become HOA president by giving up easily. 3 days later, I was having coffee in my kitchen when a black Suburban pulled up to my house. 2 people in dark suits stepped out, and I knew immediately they were federal agents. What I didn't expect was the apologetic look on their faces as they showed their FAA badges. "Mr. Eli," the woman said, "I'm Agent Sarah Chun, and this is Agent Robert Mills. We're here about the emergency landing on Monday, but probably not for the reason you think." I invited them in and poured coffee while they explained. Apparently Karen hadn't stopped with the 911 call. She'd called the FAA hotline, filed formal complaints with 3 different departments, and even contacted her congressman's office. Her reports were increasingly dramatic, claiming I was running an unlicensed commercial airport, that I'd caused the crash through negligence, and that I was covering up evidence of criminal activity. "Here's the thing," Agent Mills said, sliding a tablet across the table. "We've already reviewed your paperwork. Your strip is registered, your insurance is current, and the pilot's Mayday call confirms everything happened exactly as you reported. What we're actually investigating is Ms. Thompson." "Karen?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Agent Chin nodded. Filing false reports to federal agencies is a crime. Interfering with emergency aviation operations is a crime. And when we pulled the 911 recording, she made several statements she knew to be false. She told the dispatcher, "You caused the crash." But her own HOA security footage shows the plane was already in distress when it appeared over her neighborhood. "She records everything," I said, remembering the cameras she had installed around the HOA common areas, part of her whole security theater thing. "Well, those recordings are now evidence," Agent Mills said. "We'll need a formal statement from you, but I want to be clear. You're not under investigation. Ms. Thompson, on the other hand, is looking at some serious consequences." I gave my statement, provided all my documentation, and even showed them the thank you card Marcus had already sent from the hospital. The agents took notes, took pictures, and assured me this would be handled appropriately. What I didn't expect was how quickly the dominoes would fall. The first sign something had changed came a week later at the local coffee shop. Tom Bradley, one of the Willowbrook residents, approached me with a sheepish look. "Eli, I owe you an apology. We had an emergency HOA meeting last night. Turns out Karen's been using association funds to pay for her lawyer." "Her lawyer?" I asked. "For the federal charges," Tom explained. "She's facing up to 5 years for interfering with emergency aviation operations and another $10,000 in fines for the false reports. The FAA doesn't mess around. She tried to use the emergency meeting to get the HOA to cover her legal fees, claimed she was acting in her official capacity." "How'd that go over?" I asked, though I could guess the answer. Tom actually laughed. "About as well as you'd expect. Jennifer Martinez pointed out that filing false federal reports wasn't in the HOA charter. Then someone else mentioned how Karen's vendetta had put the whole neighborhood at risk of federal investigation. By the end of the night, we'd voted her out as president. Unanimous decision, minus her vote, of course. The final blow came 2 weeks later when I ran into Karen at the grocery store. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her usual armor of righteous indignation. She tried to walk past without acknowledging me, but I couldn't resist. "Karen," I said politely, "how are things?" She stopped, her jaw clenched tight. "You know exactly how things are. I've been fined $85,000 by the federal government." $85,000? "My lawyer says if I'm lucky, I'll get probation instead of jail time." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I actually meant it a little. "Maybe next time call and ask questions before assuming the worst." Her face contorted with rage. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't built that illegal airstrip," "Legal airstrip," I corrected gently. "Registered with the FAA since 1982. You know, the same FAA that's prosecuting you for filing false reports about it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then spun on her heel and abandoned her half-full cart right there in the cereal aisle. It was the last time I saw her. Word around town was she put her house up for sale the next week. Something about downsizing to cover legal expenses. Meanwhile, I got another letter from Marcus. He'd made a full recovery and wanted to thank me again for maintaining the emergency strip. He'd included a photo of himself standing next to his repaired plane, giving a thumbs up. I framed it and hung it in my workshop right next to my new sign that faced the Willowbrook Estates. FAA Registered Emergency Airstrip. All operations conducted under federal regulations. HOA complaints not monitored. The best part? 3 other pilots have since thanked me for maintaining the strip. Turns out it's listed in aviation charts as a safe emergency landing option for this entire region. Every time a small plane passes overhead now, I like to imagine it's Karen, looking down from a commercial flight, remembering the day she learned that homeowner association rules don't apply to federal airspace. The federal prosecutor called last week with an update. Karen had pled guilty to avoid trial. Final sentence: 2 years probation and $100,000 in combined fines and restitution. When the judge read the sentence, according to the prosecutor, Karen's lawyer had to physically hold her back as she screamed about property values and the injustice of it. And just like that, Karen learned the hard way that HOA rules don't fly in federal airspace. Her obsession with control cost her $100,000, her title, and every ounce of credibility. Next time she hears a plane overhead, she'll remember exactly who landed the final blow.